So we're just going to take a minute and let the audience know a little bit about you and who you are. So Jim, you get the enviable job of kicking that off. So tell us about Jim Irvine, who you are, what you do, and so that we sort of have an intro to the audience here. So tell us about you.
Jim Irvine, I work for Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi. My boss is the CLO for Nissan for global learning, so all around the world, and I'm her right-hand guy. So that's me.
Yeah, and so I met Jim in Nashville when we did a Chief Learning Officer Breakfast Club event. You came and spoke there. And you're a martial arts aficionado, yeah?
I don't know. I'm a judo guy.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for, I guess, 45 years. And so I'm an advanced beginner.
Okay, and 45 years gets you to advanced beginner stage.
Actually, all my skills are deteriorating at a quite rapid rate over 55, so that's, yeah. I'll be a white belt again soon.
All right, thank you, Jim. Thank you for being here. Heather, tell us about you and what you do.
Never done any karate or judo or any of that, so.
You're not going to need it this morning,
okay,
I swear.
Good deal. I'm wondering about my seat location, if I should have selected farther down. I'm Heather Pownall. Good morning, everyone. I am the Senior Director of our Global Business Development team at the Association. It's long, 22 syllables, so bear with me. Association for International Certified Professional Accountants. We're an organization representing the accounting profession, and we've been around over 130 years. The team I lead works specifically with public accounting firms and companies around the world, helping them develop learning programs for their finance and accounting staff. So happy to be part of the discussion today, and looking forward to hearing from all of you as well.
Yeah, welcome. And you have the most awesome glasses, I do have to say.
Yes.
If we can bring down the light, I'm not literally saying this, but if the lights go down at some point, you will see what I mean. Her glasses are awesome, so thank you. All right, finally, Dave, let us know about you.
So good morning, everyone. Dave DiFilippo, and after being a CLO a few times over and recently finishing up as a CHRO of a small firm in Boston, I struck out on my own, and I'm focused on executive coaching, leadership development, and talent management. Delighted to be here, and really have enjoyed the event, so look forward to having a nice conversation about mentoring. Yeah.
Dave is, we share a similar background in that we were both high school teachers. You were a Spanish teacher, track coach.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's great to have you back on stage here. All right, so I'm going to come back to you guys. So I asked, we wanted to make this a conversation with you. So that question of what are the struggles that you guys are running into as you're setting up mentoring? I want to start there because we've got some great points of view and we're going to dive into that. But I think we want to hear from you first. So anybody want to share when they're working on mentoring? What are some of the challenges and struggles that you face? Thank you. You cool with the throw?
Hey, good morning. I'm Jason with Gulfstream Aerospace down in Savannah. We've got a strong pipeline of co-ops and interns that come in at the start of their career, but we've got a existing workforce that is interested in continuing to grow their skills and don't really have a means for them to engage in a formal mentoring process, discuss where the edges of that are, and have clear expectations about is this leading to a new position? Is this just adding to my personal toolbox of skill sets? How do you work through the legal and just the informal edges of both sides of that conversation, feeling that they got something out of it from your existing workforce?
Yeah, good. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think there's a lot of what we're going to talk about that we'll tap into that. Yeah, I'm coming right back over here. Oh, Ashley's right behind you.
I was just waiting for the throw. Yeah. No, I'm Jim Trinker from the Department of Veteran Affairs, and I don't know, I struggle with these formal mentoring programs, and I don't know, I guess I've seen so many of them in the different organizations that I've been that I've become jaded to them, because what typically happens is you spend a lot of money to get some kind of online system, and you know, it benefits 25 people and they overwork the 3 mentors who sign up, and then about a year later it goes away and you waste a lot of money. And you know, I find the informal ones that are the ones that take off and do much better. So is there a formal, informal, something that's a hybrid that is actually useful and will gain more than just my professional students? Every organization has professional students.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, I'm glad that we're hearing the things that we plan to talk about. This is a bonus, so thank you for that. How about, okay, come right over here. We'll get a couple more thoughts, and then we're going to dive into this. All right, here it comes. You ready?
All right. Good morning. Victoria Kaysen with the Tarrant Regional Water District. So we do not have a mentoring program. It is something that's on our radar to develop over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'd be interested in knowing if you knew then what you know now when you were setting up your program, what questions do you wish you'd asked? What does success look like now that has changed? And what are the fundamental kind of development and starting points that you established to get going?
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, right up here. All right, we'll do 2 more. So we'll do Kevin and then Ashley, if you can get the microphone over
Thank
there.
you. Love to hear your insights on the issue of mentoring versus sponsorship. Because oftentimes we set these programs up less to just have people have conversations, and more about I want to advance certain talent in my organization, yet some would say mentoring itself doesn't do that. You need sponsorship. But talk about the messiness of sponsorship when you're trying to put a mentoring program together, if that all makes sense. But
Going deep. Oh.
Shout out to former teachers, so good job. I was a former teacher too, high school. Anyway, so can we have a conversation about the differences and similarities between coaching and mentoring? Because I think there's some maybe some overlap there, possibly, and to kind of delve into, you know, your definitions of mentoring and coaching, and to dig a little bit deeper into that.
That is a perfect transition to our first point, which is let's start with definitions of what it is that we're talking about. And Dave, we actually have somebody who has done some PhD work on some of these areas. So we've got somebody who I think is a great person to kick that conversation off. So,
yeah.
you know, start us off on that definition question. What is mentoring, and start to maybe pull out those differences between some of the other topics that we've heard here.
Sure, I'd love to. And I think this addresses your question, and also Kevin, I think it touches on yours. So, you know, one of the things that I found in my corporate career that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and maybe I overcorrect for it, so I'll apologize in advance, but you know, we speak in corporations without a lot of clarity, and we say a lot of words like strategy, tactics, coaching, mentoring, and we're not really clear about what they mean. And what that sometimes does is you have an intention to solve a problem, but you actually solve it with the wrong solution. So in the case of mentoring, if you sort of look at the history, mentoring has its roots in Greek mythology. And so Odysseus actually told his friend Mentor to help him with his son's development and help him with his son's kind of life. And the quote is that he said, "Tell him everything that you know." So there's an important distinction here, because a mentoring relationship, it's okay for that to be about telling and sharing experiences and saying, hey, when I was in your role 10 years ago as a first-line manager, here are the things that I did, and sharing practices. Now, on the other hand, coaching is much more of a Socratic process, again, rooted in Greek mythology, Socrates, and it's about asking questions that lead to self-discovery, that lead to self-awareness, that lead to self-correction, so you can sustain a set of behavior changes. And it's an important distinction. Now, having said that, neither one is better than the other. They just need to be used with intention. They can also be used at the same time, you know, depending on what you're trying to solve with a person, be it an executive transition, be it you know, executive onboarding, et cetera. And then Kevin's point around sponsorship, I think, is kind of the third leg of the stool, which leads us to the whole idea that within an organization, be it for a junior person that is aspiring to become a leader in the organization, or be it as we work with diverse populations and we're trying to help people from those populations rise up in the organization, sponsorship at the executive level becomes a really relevant thing that can be worked in combination with both mentoring and coaching, but is specific in that sponsorship is about someone really sort of being your champion in the organization to help you move in the organization, whatever movement means in your organization. Those are the way I look at them, and a lot of that's rooted in research. But I know as we talked this morning, there's some other things that you guys think about with this.
Yeah, so Jim, maybe you could, it's even more complicated from your point of view, all the terms that we're using. So yeah, you kick us off, and then Heather, I want to hear from you too.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think it's really critical that we define for the organization exactly what these terms mean, because often if you ask 3 people, you'll get 5 opinions on what mentoring is. So in our organization, we sort of think about coaching in 2 parts, performance coaching and sort of developmental coaching. And we might think of performance coaching as teaching the what and the how, which officially may not be coaching, but that's how our organization thinks of it. Also, that distinction between coaching and mentoring is absolutely critical. We at one point really were using mentoring to develop knowledge, skills, attributes, but we did a survey of the mentees, and over 70% of them said that their goal of being in a mentoring program was career progression. So a big disconnect. So again, I think it's very important that you clarify so that people know what they're getting into, what the goal is, what the purpose of the mentoring is. And then, like you said, sort of career progression.
Yep, I couldn't agree more about the importance of defining what these mean within your organization. Who was at the coaching culture session this morning? Right, especially in the context we're in now, where a lot of organizations want to have a coaching culture. We heard the quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." There's a lot of emphasis on creating that culture, equipping managers with mentoring and coaching skills. So everyone's now a mentor and a coach. And I have a shared pet peeve where, when you hear a manager saying that, I did some coaching with them, and so I asked, tell me more about the coaching you did, and it's like, yeah, it was not coaching. That was some performance feedback. And similarly with mentoring, there are some best practices, and I think a lot of times we kind of conflate these terms, and that doesn't help for the people within our organizations who are benefiting or who we intend to benefit from these. It doesn't help them understand what they should be bringing to those conversations, what they should be expecting to get out of it, and so that really can affect the results we could expect to see overall.
So to the panel, what are the purposes for mentoring? So why do we mentor? Let's maybe pull that thread a little bit so that we can, kind of maybe make it a little bit more crystallized for folks in the audience. So why mentor? Why is this an appropriate tool? When is it an appropriate tool? Why and when is it an appropriate tool? Maybe, Dave, you mind starting us off there?
Sure. I mean, a couple things. Number one, career transitions, right? Whatever that means in the context of your organization, be it a promotion to the next level, be it a movement to another business unit for rounding. Every time there's a transition, it's a great opportunity for mentoring to help the individual get some advice from someone that's been there, done that. A couple other things that we were actually talking about this morning are things like expatriate assignments, the focus on, in a global organization, how can you use mentoring to help people move globally as well? And then I guess the third point I'd make around mentoring is if we think about over the last 2 days, right, some of the presentations that have been made and some of the really great data that Brenda shared from EY around the readiness of learning professionals, it's right in front of us, everyone, right? If you're sitting in the room right now and you're thinking, I either want to be a CLO or I want to get to the next level, a great way to do it while you're here is to go find a mentor and find someone that would work with you even outside of your organization. I'll tell you this quick story. So I spent about 3 years with a former colleague of mine from a different company who had moved to another company. We just had always gotten along. And for 3 years, I mentored him on the phone just to sort of help him with his career and just to answer what I'd call kind of the am I crazy questions and just to help him. And here I am now, I'm in a different space in my career and I'm doing my own thing. And go figure that the person who is now looking to me to actually provide me with some work is this person who I helped mentor. That was not manipulative on my part, but that bond of sort of me helping him and him sort of feeling like he wants to give back is very real. And as I think about it as kind of a senior person in the profession now, I think it's really important that we think about service back to the profession. I've been doing this for over 25 years. It's really important to me that all the people in the room, the more junior people, find a way to advance the profession so that the things that we saw yesterday and the day before about advancing the field, are not going to be a challenge for us.
Heather, what about that why question? Why mentor? How do you make that decision when you're saying, when you're dealing with that confusion about coaching and mentoring and sort of hitting into that point of why mentor? What's the best purpose from your point of view?
Yeah, everything Dave said. He really covered some good bases there. If I would share from a different perspective on a more personal note, not so much from the standpoint of why within the organization, although I have a point on that too. But personally, I think there's a lot of benefit we can see from mentoring as it relates to helping minority, whether gender, LGBT, ethnic minorities, to advance within their profession. So personally, I've been involved with a 2-year mentorship program with the American Society of Association Executives based out of DC. Wonderful organization. About 15 years ago, looked around and said, you know what, it's a bunch of white guys at the top of these nonprofits and associations. And no offense to my esteemed peers in here, I love them, and there's a place for everybody, but when we look around and see the leadership at the top is not very diverse, and we start looking at the world around us looking very different and rapidly changing, we need different perspectives at the top of the organizations as well. So I had the wonderful privilege of being part of a 2-year program that the ASAE started about 15 years ago in partnership with the city of Detroit. And it's, talk about putting your money where your mouth is. The city of Detroit and ASAE have funded for the past 16 years now this program that is intensive curriculum of leadership development, and mentoring is a big component of that. So through that, I had 2 mentors, one who was the VP of Innovation at ASAE and another who was the CEO of a multinational organization. These are just people I never would have interacted with or had the opportunity to connect with. So, and I learned so much from just being in their circle of influence, from being able to bounce ideas around. So personally, I've seen a lot of benefit from mentorship, and I've seen my career trajectory continue in the direction of, up that it was headed already, but it certainly, I believe it played a role in accelerating that progress and also giving me the kind of confidence to believe in myself and show up and speak show up as a woman oftentimes in a table filled with men, to show up and speak, even if, I might have had the insecurity. I had a conversation with my mentor about this big meeting, and I got a little boost of confidence that I needed to take me into it. And I think that's really important for particularly people who are in the other or the only or any kind of minority category, just to have that moral support.
And you mentioned that you work with the CPAs, and there are a lot of issues with women's career paths forward too, and so it's an important issue there.
That's right.
As well.
Thank you for reminding me. That was the other point I wanted to make. So, within the accounting profession, we see a lot of what many other professions see, which is many women. 57%, I believe, accounting graduates are women, but they're continuing to fall out of the profession the higher you go. So we looked at, we have a women's leadership initiative at AICPA, and we looked at a pilot mentoring program with them, and using one of the platforms, you can research, there's different platforms out there. We piloted a technology that lets people go in and create a profile, select some areas they're interested in and some goals that they have, and then, the system will automatically match them with a mentor, and they can override that match and go through the database and find someone else if they think someone else might be a better match. And then they get connected. They have an opportunity to create an agreement, so they can sign up for 9 months or 12 months. They can actually select certain minority status if they're interested in connecting with someone around that specifically. And this pilot has worked really well. 90% of the people involved said they would absolutely recommend that we scale this bigger. So we've now rolled that out to the broader. We have 650,000 members and students worldwide, so we've rolled that out. It's in the first year, and so we're kind of in the infancy stages. I can't really help with the question that was asked about what would you do differently, because we're not quite far along the journey yet to be able to say that. But so far, it's providing a lot of value for people, and they've got this platform that lets them track their goals and see the results of it. So we're seeing some good results and anecdotal feedback that this is really making a difference in not just the women in the profession, but for all the people. Our mission's driving a dynamic accounting profession worldwide, so we support people in their career growth, and this is one of the ways that we think we're going to be investing even more in.
So Jim, you're in a lot of places with your business, across the world. A lot of, you're an automaker, Nissan. Not you personally, but Nissan is. How do you use mentoring across Nissan? I mean, why do you use it? And can you give us some examples of what it looks like in Nissan?
Yeah, 20 plus years ago when I started, it was the things like new hires, executive onboarding. It was developing executives, high potentials, accelerating. And then we also, later, we started doing sort of special underrepresented groups. So it could be women's or veterans or things like that. But one of the things we've been doing lately is we've been using more informal mentoring to bring disparate or groups together that don't get along. So for example, Renault and Nissan, obviously a French company, a Japanese company, very different cultures, if not opposite cultures. We've started having, when a Japanese engineer is working on a joint project with Renault, let's get somebody who really knows France well to mentor him on how to work with and succeed with the French, and vice versa. That could be Brazil, US, Mexico, it doesn't matter. But other things like, any group that isn't getting together, it could be cross-functional. Manufacturing engineers aren't getting along with design engineers. Well, when you have a design engineer mentoring a manufacturing engineer, all of a sudden they understand each other's worlds and difficulties and challenges, and it starts bringing them together. So there's other ways that you can use mentoring more than just that traditional.
Yeah. Well, let's assume that we sell this audience on, whether they're considering starting up a mentoring program and are trying to figure out where they start, or they just haven't seen it work in the past and are hesitant to jump back in. Where would you start if you're starting up a program or you're restarting a program for mentoring? What advice do you have at that point that you've got to get right here, right now, if this thing is actually going to work? What do you do? Jim, maybe you can keep going off that point.
Yeah, I would first say clear definitions, where we started. What is it, what it's not, what is its purpose, what are its boundaries? Let people clearly articulate the expectations of this program. Then I think it's really important you've got to have good mentors, people that want to do it and that are skilled to do it. I mean, I'm a world of engineers, right? We have a lot of engineers that really want to mentor but don't have many skills. And likewise, you have people that want to be mentored but don't have the skills to receive tough feedback.
Yeah.
All they want is a cheerleader, So they need to have the skills. I guess the third big thing I would say is you really need to have time carved out where it's important. And that means maybe holding people accountable, like a plan and follow-up, or it could be praise and recognition. But accountability, carve out time, make it important, make it a priority, and then hold them accountable, hopefully positively with praise and recognition. And then matching, good matching system.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But coming back to the readiness question, how do you determine that the mentor is ready or can be ready, but also that mentee, the person who's going to be mentored? Because there's a readiness question right there, as you said, that they've got to be. How do you make those assessments and those judgments?
For us in our organization, that really depends on what level the mentoring is at. So if we're talking about global executives, there's not many mentors available. And if we're using internal mentors, external mentors, different issue. But if you're using internal mentors, there's not many of them, and you're usually told who will be the mentors. So there's not really much of a
It's not a selection process that's been selected. Yeah.
So then you try to change their perspective if it's not right, skill them up, give them the resources, give them structure if they need it, get out of their way if they're really, really good. And likewise, if it's a nomination process, like a key talent, high potential, often they don't have a choice. but then you really try to convince them of the importance of it so that they want to. I mean, maybe a bad analogy is we probably all want to lose weight and get more fit, but do we do it? You know, how do we convince people to want to do it, to want to invest time and energy in being a mentee, to follow up with that? Lots of ways you can do that, pre and post 360s, having an action plan that's reported out, involving the boss, but there's some confidentiality issues there as well. But I don't think there's a right way. I think you have to find what is the goal, the end result, what is a clean, simple path to get there, and then it's just raw, hard work. The biggest failures we've had is when we created a program and then build it and they will come. These things are high maintenance, take high effort. The more effort you put into them, the better they go. All the ones that have failed for us are, even if we used external and so forth, it was sort of like outsource it. I just want to do it in name, but I'm not willing to put in the time and energy to ensure its success.
Yeah. Heather, how about you? Kind of coming back to that where start question, because you actually have you mentioned started up a program. What were some of those key things that you had to ask yourself and the organization at that point to determine?
Yeah, I think the first question was what is our role in this? So in looking out at the accounting profession and the challenge of we were seeing based on gender parity in the accounting profession, and what role does mentoring potentially play, and then what's our role as the professional organization that we are? What role can we play in it? Internally, we're also looking at the same model that we're using externally. We're looking at bringing that in internally, and so we're kind of even more infancy stage on that conversation, and that's where we're at right now, is asking the question of what is our role as an organization here in facilitating mentorship within for our own 1,300 staff in 44 countries around the world. And I'm learning a lot from chatting with both of these guys about how we need to get the senior leadership aligned around the level of investment that we want to put into it and the mindset that we want to bring. So if I'm kind of fascinated by this paradox, Jim, of you've got to invest in it because it's, as you said, hard work, but at the same time, there's some of this that is not within the control of, it's like Match.com. We want to create the matches, and we want to provide enough structure and parameters. And that's kind of where we are right now with seeing our role, both externally and internally for our own staff, is we're the facilitators of meaningful, relevant connections, and we're providing parameters and some tools to help them construct, a meaningful 9 or 12-month engagement together. And have some assessment on the back end so everyone can really determine, was it worthwhile? Did they get what they intended out of it? And that'll help us. That learning will help us to kind of adapt and take the program forward in maybe some adjusted ways going forward. But I think that's where it starts, is what is the role that you're intending to play in this? Because you may find some leaders or stakeholders in this conversation may not have a lot of exposure to what other organizations have done or best practice, and they may think, we've got to have a fully formed, structured, very controlled experience. And as we've heard, that end of the scale may be just disastrous and ineffective. Similarly, on the other end, you can't just build it and they will come. So getting everyone aligned on that happy medium would be a good starting point.
You bring up a great point that I hadn't thought of until now. When I think about all the mentoring initiatives that we've done, the ones that have struggled have mostly been L&D and HR initiatives. The ones that have gone really well have been requests from a business unit who was bought in and invested, and we consulted and advised and enabled, but it wasn't our program. And I didn't realize there's been a big difference for us in our ones that were challenging and ones that were very successful and easy.
I want to share a point of view on this topic. So the gentleman over here asked or made a comment about sort of formal and the amount of work and so forth. I mean, in my experience, that I've seen work really well, to your point, Jim, is when the corporate kind of learning group or talent group or whatever owns the standards and owns the toolkit, but is flexible enough in the implementation that the business unit or the functional areas implement and really own it, it works really well. And I'll give you a real example. So when I worked at the Bank of New York Mellon, we had a subsidiary business unit, and they formed a mentoring council, and it was made up of people in the business, and really kind of HR and my team were there really just to provide tools and standards and help them. And this mentoring program, they were like zealots. I mean, they had goals and presentations to the executive committee, and it was a big deal thing to the point where if you were in it, some of the the people that would then have to present to the executive committee, they were like super nervous, and there was lots of excitement. And then when it was done, it was they had like a graduation ceremony. So it was like it bordered on almost being like a leadership development program, but the magic in it had nothing to do with HR and L&D. It was everything about the business unit. And I think that this is an important point because the risk is if you over-engineer these things, like everything that we risk doing, they feel bureaucratic, the user experience is sub-optimized, but if you enable these things with really good methodology and tools, you can do two things. You can put the onus on the BU or the function to own it, which is really important. But the second thing, which becomes important the larger organization is you can scale it in a way that allows it to grow within the organization with or without technology. Because I would argue that process has to come before technology. And then technology can just be a way to do it even better, faster, cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a couple more big questions I want to dive into this, but I want to open it back up because, as I said at the beginning, I really want this to be a conversation. And I think we're starting to answer some of your questions, but I want to bring it back out here and see what questions, comments you may have that we can add to this. So let's take a little bit of time for your questions. Looks like, Ashley, there's one up front right there.
Hi. Mariam Bredeshko. We relatively successfully run mentorship programs in the company, but we face an interesting situation. So mentors, on one side, are very happy to be mentors because that's a kind of recognition for them. On the other hand, they are complaining, what if I transfer all the knowledge and skills I have and I'm replaced? So how to somehow motivate them to do more teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, maybe you can start that one because I mean you're dealing with a lot of engineers who are very focused on that.
I think it brings up a good point. Sometimes we have mentors within a function or a promotional line, and often we intentionally don't allow that to happen. So if it's about knowledge and skill, like I want engineers to become better engineers, we keep it in that line. However, if it's general attributes, skills, we try to keep it out to avoid that sponsorship issue that comes in. We really haven't had a lot of issues around mentors not wanting to mentor because they feel like they're going to give over their knowledge and skill. We really haven't had that a lot. I think our organization moves people pretty quickly, so there's always something new moving on. And I guess historically or hysterically, we have typically mentored sort of high potential, high performers. So if in the world of engineering, they might be going through 5 or 6 disciplines of engineering, and it's the context of this mentoring is they need to have a very good understanding of each little piece because they're going to be leading a much larger team, not that they're going to become an expert at any one piece. But I think that would be really interesting. It might be a symptom of a root cause around trust within the organization, and maybe some organizational culture issues that maybe need to be addressed first.
That was my response internally as well to that. Was it kind of reflects almost a constrained thinking versus a growth mindset. So I put that question back to them of aren't you also working on growing and being mentored yourself? And if you're not, you should be. Everybody should be. So they're creating their own growth path as well while they're bringing up others along behind them.
Right up here.
Thank you. This has been very helpful. One question I have, I'd be interested in the panel's perspective on how you set the mentee up for success in the process. We have I work for Cisco, and we have an informal, formal kind of mentoring program, and I have 2 mentees. One comes to the table and has amazing content, asks me great questions. We have great sessions. The other one comes to the table, and it's almost like just talking. And so I wonder how you have set up your mentees to get the most out of the program.
Who wants to tackle that one first?
I'll start with it. I mean, so in the program that I mentioned earlier, that was uber successful, it was all about the mentee showing up with some goals that were rooted in the context of the organization, the business unit goals, so that there was real context and substance to what they were going to do, and the goals couldn't be, far afield from their job or from what the business unit was trying to accomplish. But I think starting there and then figuring out from there where you want to go to get traction with those is a good starting point. And as Jim was saying earlier, then having kind of a toolkit and resources for people to point them towards, right? So that it's not just what the person knows, but it's also, hey, have you read this article on XYZ, and here's a book on this, to then have a more robust conversation as a mentor and a mentee.
I think there's a lot of great resources out there, even on YouTube or LinkedIn Learning, et cetera, on how to accept feedback, how to be ready for feedback, especially like the generational differences is real important. On some of our more formal mentorings, we'll often do surveys. So like you said, if it's a 12-month engagement, and we always have very defined periods of time where either party can bow out, but if it was for 12 months and they're supposed to have a once-a-month meeting, the mentor would rate me on my readiness and willingness and those kind of things, and I would rate my mentor on their preparedness and so forth. So it's almost like a 180 assessment. So I know at the end there will be a score, and that will be shared with my boss. And especially, again, these are more for the high potentials, key talent, where it is part of their advancement.
And so this might be an interesting moment to kind of reflect on mentoring versus coaching, and just speculating, but it sounds like the second mentee you described may not have a lot of clarity on their goals, and maybe shifting into some coaching to help them develop some awareness of what it is they'd like to see next in their career. That may be an opportunity to break out. If you were in that coaching session, there were like 6 questions, break out some of the coaching questions and then flip over to some more mentoring. Okay, well, now that I see where it is you'd like to go next, let's talk about how maybe I can help you and share some of my own experiences that would help you take some next steps.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm going to come right here, and then Ashley, I believe there's a couple of questions up front as well.
Hello, folks. My name is Aubrey, and I work with PEI Genesis. And I have a question around the dynamic of the manager versus the mentor versus the mentee relationship. How do you set up all 3 for success, knowing that there might be some crossover between what the mentor brings to the table versus their direct supervisor?
In my world, it's, again, we have so many different kinds. For executive, it's often the mentoring is very confidential. And some of the other programs, it's not. And there's a clear agreement or contract between the mentor, the mentee, actually the boss, and HR. So, and there's a clear understanding what is confidentiality going to be? Have we going to run that? So in some cases, the mentor will not share anything discussed, but they will share, have they accomplished these predefined goals or objectives. But usually I think one, it's clearly articulate the roles and the expectations for each of those parties. As was mentioned, give them simple tools to do that well, and then have some simple, hopefully positive way to hold them accountable.
I think we're back there. And then I know there were some questions up here. I'll get over here.
I have a question from an inclusion perspective. So my past experience where you have few female senior leaders that they feel almost tokenized, like, oh, I have to mentor all of the women. And then on the other side, I'm hearing a lot of, because of the Me Too movement, that men are hesitant to mentor earlier tenure female leaders. Just wondering if you've experienced any of that and how you have addressed it.
We actually talked about that question as we were trying to talk about this panel. How do we address that? And kind of felt like that's such a big topic that we didn't want to tackle it too directly. But I think to answer your question, Heather, we were just talking backstage a little bit about how we can address that.
That's right. So first of all, thank you for being mindful of that. I think it's really important to think about how what pressure we put on other women who've made it to the top to now be the only source of mentorship and sponsorship for all the rest of women trying to make their way. We need men to be mentors just as much, if not now, more than ever. And I suggest checking out leanin.org. They have come out with some response to, and specifically in response to kind of backlash around Me Too. They've done a quick survey and showed that men are now like 2 times more likely than they were before #MeToo, 2 times more likely now to feel uncomfortable in a mentoring relationship with a woman at their own organization. So we need men and women as mentors. And we as women, we as ethnic minorities, we as any minority, we need mentorship perhaps more than anybody, because it's not something that there's. Check out Lean In. I won't go on my rant because I kind of promised that we wouldn't go down this
No,
path.
honestly, it's such an important question, and it's asked, so let's go.
Right, so yeah, I mean, we're less likely as women, as ethnic minorities, as other minorities to get the kind of promotion opportunities, mentorship, sponsorship, all the good stuff, for a lot of different dynamics that kind of play into that. One of them being, one just specific example, people in the positions of power now, which are predominantly white men, white straight men, they look around and they see other people who look like them and they say, you know what, he reminds me of me when I was just starting out, and they kind of have an affinity. There's this affinity bias for helping them along. I've seen this happen, and it's pretty infuriating because it's not even unconscious bias, like it's blatant, like to everybody around, and there's not a lot of awareness that that's happening, but that's one of the factors that means we have to be more proactive in reaching out and creating these connections and these opportunities to be mentored, sponsored, get feedback that can help us to make strides forward in our careers. So I think check out leanin.org. I think there is an effect that's being shown around the backlash on Me Too and the role that now men feel kind of uncomfortable to play, and we need them, so we've got to overcome that. So it starts with awareness. So again, thanks for the question.
Yeah, and it's something that from the Chief Learning Officer magazine perspective, we're going to be doing a lot more with, because I think it is such an important question, and it's something we can do an entire panel, entire day around. So we're going to dive into that a lot more too. All right, right here, and then I think there's one.
So I want to go back to when you mentioned hopefully there's rewards for the mentors. So we know that there's the intangible benefits out of being a mentor, right? And if you're really passionate and you want to do a service to the profession, that will lead to you wanting to be a mentor, right? But we also need to talk about the fact that we get trapped in the whirlwind of our day, and it's so difficult to make time for the strategic things because we get so busy in the tactical things many times, right? And that's the reality of a lot of our leadership. So I was wondering, what best practices do you guys have to not lose momentum? Or like, oh, I'm so excited, I'm gonna be a mentor, and then they lose the momentum and they get into the whirlwind. And what are then some tangible benefits that we can put in place to continue to extrinsically motivate them to be successful mentors?
Dave, you want to start?
Best practices or just practices?
Well, you said you made a lot of mistakes, so maybe you can.
I've made all the mistakes.
But you said you never repeated them, so.
Most often not, except for with my kids.
So, and you said, some of the measurement at the end, there's were the goals achieved? That would seem to put some accountability to ensure that it doesn't fall off the radar.
Yeah, to me, I think you said several good things, but one is we want to make the reward intrinsic, if at all possible, right? Extrinsic is, we know how difficult that is and how dangerous it can be, but intrinsic. A lot of it for me is, I want to make it so it's absolutely easy. Because our high potentials, let's just say our mentors are high-performing high potentials, they're all working literally 60, 70 hours a week. So I always think of that every time I ask them to spend an hour mentoring, it's an hour away from their family or their friends or hobbies. So we have to make it rewarding. So one way is, what makes it difficult to mentor? Get rid of all those roadblocks, give them tools, give them examples, give them quick YouTubes that they can send, anything that can make them amazingly successful, make them heroes. We want to be the little Yoda behind the scene that makes them the hero mentor with very little time or effort. The second thing we try to do is we try to catch people doing things right. Thank you, Ken Blanchard. And we actively seek out and do quick surveys and find people that have a great mentor and highlight them, catch them doing things right. And it might be an email, it might be an email to that mentor's boss, it might be a quick little video, very amateur video segment, but anything that you can do that pulls on their heartstrings, that's a positive thing for them. And just, because I think of, my job is to create energy and momentum and then sustain that. And if I do it right, you pass that tipping point where it becomes self-sustaining. But it takes effort at first unless they're exceptional.
I think when people say they don't have time for something, that's really just saying that's not my top priority, and it's not something I can make the time for. I'm not going to make the time for. And the reason we don't make time for certain things is because we're valuing other things over those. So they're not seeing the value maybe, so I would work on helping to create that value proposition for why mentoring. We started talking about some of the reasons why organizations should be kind of playing some kind of role in this, and what the benefits and value that people will get out of it can be. So sharing some of that could play a role in creating some of that energy and buy-in.
Anything you want to add, Dave, before we go to the next question?
I'm going to say this. I agree with my panelists. I think what you guys said is really at the heart of it. But I would also just pile on and say one more thing. In my view, my humble opinion, being a little bit irreverent here, if you're not mentoring and you don't have time to be a mentor, as a leader, you're not doing your job. And so I think that could speak to organizational culture, what's important. But in my experience in organizations, when we've set up either leadership processes and programs and mentoring relationships, we've had teeth in those so that there's accountability. And if you can't get that accountability, I think you have a different problem you have to solve first.
Right up front here.
So I was thinking about kind of the cultural piece. So there are certain things you learn from your family, from your culture. So investing, the benefits of owning versus renting, the benefits of developing networks, things like that. And a lot of what we've been talking about has been around the responsibility of the mentors and preparing the mentors and the processes and systems to support it. My thought or my question is around the power and the value of focusing the energy and attention on teaching the mentees to seek out mentors. Because the act itself of seeking out those relationships and actually reaching out and saying, hey, I would like to have an ongoing conversation with you, that helps them to develop those muscles and those skills that make them better at being. And so I'm really curious about where the weight and the role of the mentee plays into the equation.
I think that's beautifully said. We put as much energy in sort of developing and helping the mentee become self-sufficient as we do the mentor. Because if a great mentee makes your life easy, right? So yeah, I think you beautifully said.
Yeah, there should be that the onus is really on them to define what it is they'd like to get out of this. And that's not always easy if it's not something you've had a lot of exposure to. I'll reference Lean In again. It has a great section in there specifically for women, but I think the advice there would be good for anyone on how to go about finding a mentor. There's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek section where it's like, should I just walk around like, will you be my mentor? Will you be my mentor? Are you my mentor? And I think some people have, especially when everyone should have a mentor. No, now you need a sponsor, like depending on which women's conference you've been going to over the past few years. It's a little confusing and you think, oh my gosh, well, I need to get on this. I need mentors and sponsors. And other fairy godmothers, and what's next, I don't know. But yeah, it's on us to kind of figure out how we want to go about finding those connections. And there's some great advice on how to do that in the book Lean In. But I'll give just a quick example, and I'll hopefully not embarrass Dave here. But and also this speaks to the informal versus formal. So in an informal personal way, every one of us has made lots of great, meaningful connections here. Some of them, and I think everyone can learn something from everyone. Sometimes it was just that spark out in the hallway, and that was it. Great conversation. It's not like, oh, will you now be my mentor? Or, it doesn't have to become instantly formalized like that, but sometimes you have a deeper connection, energy, and this is where I'm going to put Dave on the spot. He's done a lot of things that as I learned more about him in our quick conversation yesterday, maybe 5-10 minutes, every part of him that he revealed about himself, his journey up to now, what he's now doing, his PhD in education, everything related to me as part of the journey that I've been on and also the journey that I see for myself. And I said, you know what, I think I've just found my next mentor in you, and I'd really like to continue talking with you and learning from you. So and he was, very gracious in saying, well, however I could help, So I think
That's funny. He turned me down.
he knew that would be hard on him. So
raw material issue.
So I think you're absolutely right. We need to equip people with the mindset and some tools about how to go about finding a mentor, and that starts with being clear on what it is you'd like to get out of any kind of mentoring relationship, be it formal or informal.
And for organizations, here's one thing I would say is, I think it's absolutely critical that you really do a good job of developing your mentees, because that's your bench strength, that's your pool for your future mentors. One of our biggest challenges is we don't have enough mentors. Well, most people who have had great mentee experiences will grow into be great mentors. And so that's your talent pool for that next wave of mentor-mentee relationships. So I wouldn't underemphasize the importance of growth and development of mentee. And as you mentioned earlier, sometimes that's switching out of the mentor hat into the coaching hat and say, okay, you need to do a better job. Here's what we expect. Come on, step up, be a part of this relationship. Because I want
to get on another path, though, to your question for just 30 seconds. So I think that there's another facet to what you brought up, which I think is an excellent point. And it's the idea of reverse mentoring, which, Jim, to your point, is a way to prepare, probably the demographically younger folks to be great mentors when they're at more senior levels. And I'll give you a couple real examples. So in the organization that I was most recently in, there's a lot of technology that enabled folks to do their jobs. And as we looked at having 54% millennials, and as we looked at some of the people that were really technically proficient being old like Mike and I, the idea of reverse mentoring really became helpful to teach some of these very experienced, knowledgeable folks technological things, and have the younger people do that who were just really much more able to do it more quickly. And that relationship was really interesting to see the learning aptitude that folks had, and they were the folks that were learning were really grateful to learn and see how easy this stuff was, and in part, they also transferred their knowledge to the younger generation. So that kind of marriage, if you will, almost, was really, really powerful. And I think it also sets the stage for what's going to happen down the road. Back to your question, sort of culturally in the organization around what's important, what do I make time for, how do we think about development, who's responsible, and so forth.
Yeah.
So we got a question up here.
Yeah, if I could follow on to that a little bit, guys. So the fun part is working with the thin end of the bell curve and your high performance folks, and you can see the return on the investment of that, but then you've got the other 85% of the employees, somebody that's a moderate performer, you can see may or may not really be a good fit into the area that they're expressing an interest in going into. What are some tools? We mentioned the younger folks joining the workforce that often will perceive mentorship as just the balloon that magically rises you across 15 years of experience to a new level without putting in the work. How do we prep the existing workforce to enter into a mentorship program and do their due diligence, the kinds of things that drive a high performer that maybe are intuitive or they've done the legwork, somebody that hasn't, how do you direct them to some places to build their self-awareness to the point where they're ready to hear what you've got to share with them? You mentioned lean in a couple times. Is there any other places to help prep a mentee to get involved?
Yeah, you mentioned some really good tools and content that you're providing. You're both mentee and mentor at the start of the relationship to help kind of set a foundation for their engagement.
Yeah, I think the reverse mentoring is a great way to start this because, again, you have a lot of people that are sort of that middle of the road. They're not proactive. Some of them are just pure raw introverts that just need a different style. It needs to be a safe way to be mentored. But we've been trying to use some sort of themes like technology. If you don't know what Instaface tweet chat is, find a young person who can help you with that, or big data, or data analytics, or social media, or all these things that some of us did not grow up with that we would love to know more about. And some of the younger folks are very, very willing to do that. Also, sometimes I think it really works well is if it's not in their area of expertise. So if you're an engineer and you have somebody that's in marketing that wants to know more about engineering, it's a little easier. It's sort of middle of the bell curve discussions, not that thin edge as you mentioned. So I think there's some ways you can do that. We're trying to do themes right around technology and innovation and all these kinds of things that us older, more entrenched, been around too long individuals don't know, and let the young people shine. Cross-culturally, that works fantastic. Let the Brazilians teach us about how to work with Brazil. That's working great in South Africa.
So we're just about out of time, so I want to kind of give a little bit of a chance for each of you to sort of wrap it up. If there's one thing that you hope the folks will walk away from this panel with, the one big concept when you're thinking about mentoring that they walk away with as they're going back to work and looking at their programs. What is that one piece of advice? Maybe Jim, we'll start with you and then we'll come this way.
I think Dave mentioned it well. Keep it simple. Simple is good. Complex is going to, weigh you down. And then don't think this isn't going to take energy. This isn't going to be a part-time thing that you do and then get it going and then leave it. If you want it to go well, you're going to have to invest time, to make sure it goes well. You do not have to be smart to have a great mentoring program, but you do have to be willing to put in the time and the effort and persevere.
Just saying here, not to be a stickler on rules, but that was technically like top 5. So, awesome job. Yeah, you didn't save any for the rest of us.
Yeah, you've got nothing else to say.
That really wasn't nice, Jim.
I'm sorry.
I would say maybe back to decide why you're doing this and what's your role in it, and what's the role you're going to play in it. Are you going to be that matchmaker and leave everything up to chance? Or are you going to have a bit more of structured investment in it and providing some? Jim was talking with me earlier about how they've even tied in some of their learning curriculum with the mentoring engagement. So which end of that spectrum, or somewhere in the middle, and get everyone who's a stakeholder in this aligned around that, so everyone can be a champion for and clear about the intention and the expected results.
I think that's first. That's first primary.
That's all you left me with. I had to rewind, go back to the beginning, and then your top 5, and then let's take it home, Dave.
Yeah. So I guess here's what I'd leave it. I'm gonna give you my my sort of CLO answer, and I'm gonna give you my personal answer. So as a CLO focused on talent, I would really recommend you integrate mentoring processes and practices and tools and everything we've talked about into your portfolio and into your practices don't treat it as a program over here that takes a lot of effort to maintain and risks failing when someone's not paying attention. So to me, integration becomes really important with all of these things. The personal answer I would give you is, for about a dozen years, I've been a mentor in Boston with kids at youth in a particular program called Year Up. And I will share with you that I have learned more from those young people about their lives and themselves. And I've learned as much as I hope I've shared. So my advice to you is go be a mentor, because I can guarantee you everyone in this room has things to share and also things to learn from that process. And it's been extremely fulfilling for me. So pick your spot, kids at risk, or women's shelter, or whatever the case may be. I think it's relevant to everyone.